Ready to start our second session of the day. So the first one was really kind of focused on spiritual formation and loving God. And this one is really loving through the church and focusing on how the church, what role the church plays in the midst of all of this. So we said the greatest commandment is to love God. The second like that is to love your neighbor. And really, isn't the church a good place, and hopefully the best place, where we see that living out, where we're a bunch of Christians. If we're all living into this loving God, loving our neighbor thing, when we all come together, shouldn't it just be this magical, beautiful, happy, wonderful place, right? Should be. And then there's the reality of our humanity, but, that's why we have Jim here to help share with us today. So the church is really our place to put it into practice, to encourage one another and remind people to, think back and focus back on God. So Jim is going to share with us another session on more about how we can live into the church as it should be. So go ahead, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And hey, give a hand for all the folks that put all that together out there. Well, I had a blast. I heard many of you shared quick stories about the communities that you're in and the churches that you're in. And it just was fun for me kind of listening and hearing the family stories of your various churches from in all the settings. And I'm a guy that loves family stories. Would you hang on to those for me, please? I love family stories just because it's what keeps people bonded together. And I grew up with this story of how my mother and my father met. And they told us, the kids, all through our growing up years, this story. Now, my dad was from Indiana, actually, Kokomo. His father was a Quaker preacher in Kokomo, Indiana, and he was multiply handicapped from birth. But when he became a teenager, his heart started beating fast when he met the lovely Sylvia Mae Carr, who later became my mother. And so this was a story they told of the romance. Now, let me just set the stage. They grew up in rural Illinois, not too far from here, actually. In Greenup. Anybody know Greenup, Illinois? And so, Dad, and they lived in a farmhouse, and then out of the farmhouse was a long lane, and on either side of the lane were either cornfields or soybean fields. At the end of the lane was the pond. Next to the pond was the mulberry tree. And for generations, the men of the Carr family, when they would go and they'd take, some of you remember these days, they'd get their pocket knife and they'd sit under the tree and they would carve a heart and their initials and their sweetheart's initials. So that's the setting. So Mom is over visiting on a Sunday afternoon, and they were sipping lemonade and visiting, and so Dad, he kind of announced to everybody, he said, well, May and we're going to go to the mulberry tree. And because that's where everybody carved their initials. This meant, this is serious. But he made a tactical error because he announced it to everybody, and his younger brother, my Uncle Gene, heard him. So Gene ran around that cornfield to the pond and climbed up into that mulberry tree. Now, Dad, he could only get around on crutches or a cane, depending on what was going on with him. And so by the time they got down the lane, it took a long time, and the sun was setting, and the moon was beginning to crest over the cornfield, and Dad pulled her Mom close and finished their lemonade, and he watched the moon come up over the cornfield, and he looked up and he said, "Shiny moon high above, should I kiss the one I love?" Because that's the way Midwesterners in love talk. He said, "Shiny moon high above, should I kiss the one I love?" And they were shocked when they heard a voice, "Lover boy down below, pucker up and let her go." Now, I never knew if that was a true story, but I know this is true. I know you love the Lord, and I know you love your church, and I know you love your communities. But dear friends, it's time to pucker up and let her go. to plant a passionate kiss of the grace of Jesus Christ right on that cheek of every person who lives around you. Can I get an amen? We cannot wait. I mentioned the statistics earlier today. Friends, we cannot wait. We cannot be complacent anymore. The time now is to pucker up and let her go. And to get out and go. To find your neighbors. Neighbors in pain, neighbors in hurt. To go, to find neighbors that are new. To go, but before you go fishing for new people. Friends, it's best to learn how to fish in the pond you know best, which is your church. So what I'm going to do in this section, first of all, I want to give you another story from the Bible to keep you be sure we're biblically oriented here. And then secondly, I want to actually teach you the best way to show hospitality in the life of your church today. Sound like it worth it? Okay, so now to teach you this, we have a little card here. Now, I don't think we have enough for everybody, so if you could just kind of, if maybe just get one per church or something, just throw them up. Now, friends, all the materials that my organization uses are available to you. Since you've been to this workshop, you have two bonuses for coming to this workshop. One is you have access digitally to all of our materials. So this card, if this is a helpful thing for you, then you can just download it and use it, okay? We don't charge anything for our resources. We just want to help our churches grow. And secondly, since I'm talking to churches of a wide range, I can't possibly hit each one of you individually. Some of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you today, some will work in your church. Others you'll say, what is that Texan smoking? That'll never work here. So I just want you to know you can go through John, your DS, but we provide one free follow-up phone call to any church just so we can help you as you try to implement some of the things that we're talking about. The story is that great story in Luke's gospel about Jesus going fishing. Now, you're preachers, you've all preached about this, and lay people, you all heard it. But I'm just going to share it with you just to kind of set the context, and I'll be going over this card in just a few minutes. Okay, so Jesus is moving. He's walking around. He's traveling, and he's already become a very popular preacher, and so great crowds are following him. And they come across the lake. Remember. And when at the lake, they see they see the fishermen. They pulled their boats up to the shore, and their nets are spread out to be cleaned and repaired. And Jesus sees them, and so he said, "Friends, do you mind could I get in one of your boats and go out a little bit so I can continue my message?" Now, the reason Jesus asked that is just the opposite of today. Today, the speaker, me, stands up, and the listeners, you, sit down. But in biblical days, the speaker sat down and the listeners stood up. So to better be seen, Jesus wanted to get out into the water. And so he asked, and they gave permission, and now the boats, just help me out here, be with me here. The boats are pulled half onto the bank and half into the water. They're not very big boats. And Jesus stepped into the boat. Now, you've done this, haven't you? You've seen a boat by a pond. You step into that boat, and it's not a solid thing, is it? It moves a little bit. It shakes a little bit. Let's just remember that when Jesus steps into our boat, it shakes everything up. We become a better person, a better parent, a better child. We become a better friend, a better neighbor. When Jesus steps into our boat, we see all people around us with different eyes, don't we? Can I get an amen? We have the saying back in Texas, if your boat ain't rocked, it's still docked. Friends, you can't get out and go until Jesus has stepped into our boat, right? That's the loving commandment. And so Jesus gets into the boat and they go out. Now, we have no indication of what Jesus spoke about. But I'm sure it was great. But when he finished, he said, do you remember these words? Jesus said, let's go fishing. And the fisherman said, now, look, mister, you're a really good speaker, but you don't know much about fishing because, you remember this, we have fished all night and what? We haven't caught a thing. First time in recorded history a fisherman told the truth. He said, we fished all night and haven't caught a thing. Now, the reason they fished at night, this lake is a shallow lake. I've had the opportunity to fish like this. And so in the evening time, the water temperature is warmer than the air temperature. And that causes phytoplankton to grow, especially in the shallower water. And the phytoplankton is what little minnows eat. And then the neck-sized fish eat the minnows, and the neck-sized fish eat that. So up close to here's how they would fish. The fishermen just get in the boat, and in the evening, the moonlight's out, and they're actually having a good time. They take turns kind of scouting out, and if one of them sees the swirl of a fish's back or a splash, they'll yell out, "Fish!" They jump out of the boat. They carry their nets right up against the bank in the shallowest water. The water's only about knee deep, maybe waist deep. They throw it up there. They pull it back in. They climb back into the boat, and they've caught their fish. We've fished all night, and we haven't caught a thing. And Jesus said to him, one of those great words in the Bible, "Go deep. Go deep." They said, "Look, you don't fish deep. We fish in the shallow. That's where the fish are." Jesus said, "Go deep." My dear friends, I just believe that Jesus is calling out today to Methodist churches, go deep. We've got to learn how to fish in some new ways. We've got to be intentional about figuring out what it means to catch fish that don't look like the fish of the past, maybe. That don't act like the fish of the past, maybe. Go deep. You never know what you're going to bring in when you go deep. So you know the story. They go out, and Jesus said, "Let down your nets." And they begin to catch fish. You know the story. They catch so many fish, they called for their buddies, "Hey, believe it or not, the fish are out here. Let's go fishing. Let's try some different ways. Let's try some different things." And they began to catch so many fish, their nets began to break. And that's when Simon Peter fell down and said, "Oh my God, I don't know what's going on. Go away from me." And Jesus said, "Don't be afraid, Simon. From now on, you're going to do what? Fish for people." And this is the story of the calling of the first disciples. This is the story of the calling each and every one of you to be more intentional as a disciple. This is the story of calling new disciples for Jesus Christ. And if you're a little fearful about what it might mean to get out of my comfort zone and fishing in the shallows where I've always fished, if you're a little fearful about going deep, if you're a little fearful about learning some new ways to reach this culture and teach and reach people, don't worry about it. Even the first disciples started off being what? Afraid. It's okay to be fearful. And in that fear, we put our trust and we go deep. Friends, I tell you, many of you here today, as did I, when I started in ministry, it was so easy. I mean, where I grew up in Loami, Illinois, if somebody moved into town, they were, first of all, they were a Christian. Secondly, they went to church somewhere, and if they were Methodist, they went to the Methodist. It was so easy. We just opened the door. People came. But friends, show this little video. Fish don't just jump in the boat anymore. And most of the time, they just don't jump in the boat. We have to go out and go fishing. Now, we go out and go fishing because we love our neighbors. Now, friends, the reason we practice great hospitality, the reason we become intentional, the reason we go fishing isn't so that your DS, John, will go to the bishop and brag about how well your church is doing. This is not an institutional thing. We go fishing because these are precious children of God who, for whatever reason, have wandered away. Starting in about 1968, as you know, this country changed significantly. Now, I don't know your individual church, but I'm almost willing to bet, without knowing your church, that your church community mirrors that of the rest of Indiana, which is this: no matter where you are, every 10 people that drive by your church, for every 10, 7 have no faith connection or church home. And this has gone on for so long now that these unconnected folks, wonderful people often, they are now raising children who have no connection to the church, who don't know the biblical stories. These are precious children of God. We're not trying to grow our church Can we get an amen on this? Just to boost our numbers. That's not the deal. We're growing our church because we love our neighbors. And these are people that need the grace of Jesus Christ. Here's what we know from research today. A person who visits your church for the first time, or for the first time in a long time, that is an unchurched person, most of the time today, they're not just out there shopping for a church. Most of the time today, now there are some exceptions, you know them, but most of the time today, unchurched people don't wake up and think, it's a good idea, I think I'll go check a church out. Most of the time, people come to a church for the first time in a long time within about 30 to 60 days of some life-changing event. Now, what would be a life-changing event? Help me out. Birth, death, yeah. Just as an aside, if your churches aren't providing what we would call Bible studies and support groups and study about life-changing events, you're going to miss a huge population. But when people come to your church tomorrow, you cannot assume anymore that person who walks through the doors of the church for the first time tomorrow is just casually church shopping and giving yours a shot. You just can't assume. You just don't know if the person who walks through the doors of the church for the first time tomorrow, then Wednesday evening come home and find that note on the table, I don't love you anymore, I'm out of here. You just don't know if the person who walks through the doors of your church for the first time tomorrow didn't Thursday morning get that dreaded diagnosis, cancer. You just don't know. Wherever your church is, tomorrow when they come, you don't know if they spent all Saturday night trying to get their kid out of jail. My friends, people today, amidst their smiles and their affluence, are often living in darkness or hurt or loneliness or pain. You just don't know. And so we practice hospitality, again, not to just be warm and friendly, but dear friends, so that you might become the bridge over which somebody walks for the very first time to be introduced to Jesus Christ. Amen? I don't know why God wired the world up the way God did, but there's somebody out there just because of your personality, just because of your age, just because of your quirkiness, just because of you, that you're the person that can connect with them if you will become intentional. So hospitality, here's what we're going to share with you today in the remainder of this session, is before you try to go fishing out there for new people, the best place to fish is the pond you know best, your church. Romans 12:13 says it like this: practice hospitality. So in a few minutes, I want to practice hospitality with you. And I'm serious about it, so I want you to look at me. I want you to look at me, please. I'm going to ask you today, right now, to step out on faith. Make a covenant with me today, with each other, with your pastor if your pastor's here, with each other. Make a covenant that tomorrow, Sunday, you will begin to practice what I'm going to share with you, okay? You do not need to have a committee meeting. You don't need to get anybody's permission. Just do it. Now, we call this the 5-10 link rule. You have the card there. Many of you have a card. Again, if you don't have one and this is helpful for you, here's what, pastors, let me just say to you. If you believe as I do that the number one reason that people don't come back to your church is poor hospitality, then you must teach hospitality, and not on a Wednesday night when the same 4 people will show up. Not on a Saturday workshop where the same core leaders will show up, but from the podium on a Sunday morning when you've got the biggest critical mass, at least once every year. You might even consider doing it twice. The 5-10 link rule is just a simple way for people to learn and put into practice some good hospitality. Are you with me? So, pastors, we encourage you to pass this card out. Now, there are many other hospitality systems. You might find one that you find better. We just find this one simple and easy to use. We designed this card so you can put it in your pocket, your wallet, your purse, your Bible. What I'm going to share with you very quickly, we encourage you to teach it yourself. Now, pastors or lay folks, anybody, you can. Lots of churches have made videos of me teaching this. You can go on YouTube, Jim Ozier Hospitality, and you'll see various churches. So if you have a Sunday school class, they can just look at the video, or I'll be glad to help you out in any way that we can. So you got the card. Now, on one side of the card is called the 5-10 link rule. The other side is called the weave. You see that? The weave is what we use to teach hospitality teams great hospitality. But today my interest is the 5-10 link rule, which is what we use to teach a church how to create a culture of hospitality. Here's what I mean by a culture of hospitality. Every member, every Sunday. Would you say it with me? Every member, every Sunday. Every member, every Sunday. Remember, the miracle happened when the man reached out and took it. The miracle happens in a church when lay people realize on Sunday morning, if you're here today, I'm making an assumption that you are some kind of leader in your church. Is that pretty much true? On a Sunday morning, if you're a leader of a church, if you're a staff member, a pastor, or a leader of a church, on Sunday morning, you are not there to be a consumer. You are there to be a producer. What's happened is our churches have become filled with consumers. And here's what's happened. The world has changed. Now, I'm sure Dennis is going to preach a great sermon tomorrow. I love the staging. I love his sermon series. He's going to preach a great sermon tomorrow. But anytime anybody wants, they can download a great sermon by a famous preacher. They don't need to come to church to get a great sermon anymore. I'm sure the music here tomorrow is going to be outstanding. But anybody who wants, anytime they want, can download great Christian music. They don't need to come to church anymore. What's the one thing people can't download? The people. The people. They can't download you. So be intentional. Be ready. Realize that you're there to be a producer and that your time is precious. Don't waste it on a Sunday morning. So the 5-10 link rule is to help get over that. All right? So the 5 has to do with time. Now look at me. I'm going to ask you to make a covenant. At your church tomorrow, 5 minutes before the service begins, and for the first 5 minutes after it ends, make a covenant that you will leave your best friend group and go find somebody that you do not know well and just introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Jim. Now, when I say I'm Jim, and Hannah gives me her name in American social cue, that means, okay, I'll play ball. We can have a conversation. If I say, hi, I'm Jim, and she just smiles and says, good morning, in American social cue, that means, back off, buddy. I need my personal space, and we must respect that, right? It happens to all of us. Sometimes we just need our personal space. But you can always be safe. If a person gives your name back, that means, okay, I'll play ball. The 5 has to do with time. Now, friends, tomorrow morning, buddy up with your good buddies. I mean, some of you haven't seen your best friends for several weeks. People only come to church every 4 weeks now. That's okay to buddy up. But if that's all you do, a first-time guest who may be carrying the weight of realizing that their life may be coming to an end, they remember something good about the church. They remember in times of pain when they were a little child that they went to church and it felt good. And they come to these doors, and if they walk away and say, no one even spoke to me. Oh, do you see, friends? The 10 has to do with distance. So if you're buddied all up together with your good friends tomorrow, and somebody walks within 10 feet of you alone, not on their cell phone. The cell phone is what people use today to say, don't talk to me. If they're on the cell phone, don't bother them. But if they're walking alone, break out of your group, just walk over to that person and say, hi, I'm Jim. Wendy. Now, Wendy gave me your name, which means what? She's ready to play ball. We'll play ball. So now, look, I don't want to be selling snake oil. it isn't possible in these 10 seconds for Wendy and I to become friends, is it? But friends, you can write this down. It's impossible to make a new friend without the first 10 seconds. What if your church becomes known as the church of the first 10 seconds, where nobody walks away saying, no one spoke to me? It's a myth today that people who are unchurched, de-churched, are looking for a friendly church. That is not a high value. Now, I know a little bit about friendly churches. I work in churches all over the country. I can tell you I've never walked into a church that said, hey, we're the second friendliest church in town. They all say, we're the friendliest church. That's great, friends to themselves. But the unchurched person isn't looking for a friendly church. They are looking for a church where they might make one new friend. Being friendly isn't just being warm and nice. It's Wendy allowing herself to be the bridge over which I may walk for the very first time. After that 10 seconds, we may form a bit of a friendship. We may follow up. She may realize that I am crushed because my adult son is facing leukemia. And in that conversation, she may make a connection with me that will change my life, will give me hope. Make sense? This is serious. Hospitality is not just the friendly factor of a church. It's the evangelistic factor of a church. It's what you say, my friends, God may want to use me, just who I am. There's somebody out there that I can connect to. 10 has to do with distance. So when I say, I've introduced myself to somebody, do you mind? I say, hi, I'm Jim. Donna gives me her name, and we have a bit of a conversation, and I find out that Donna is a pilot for Southwest Airlines. So here's what I want to do. I want to immediately link her, that's the link, to somebody else that has somewhat of a common affinity. So I might say, hey, would you mind? There's somebody I want you to meet. Please, right now. There's somebody I want you to meet. I want you to meet this guy. He's a flight attendant for Southwest Airlines.
Yeah. You want some peanuts?
See? Or I might say, look, here. I want you to meet this young lady here, over here. Where she lives, Southwest flies over her backyard. See, you can almost always make some kind of an affinity match. Give her a hand, thank you, right? You can almost always make, if you are what? Intentional. If you think, I'm there to help. When the man took the axe, a miracle began to happen. The best place for laity to pick up that axe is on Sunday morning, where you're in your own home field. You just be ready. Romans 12:13, remember, said practice hospitality. We're talking about creating a culture of hospitality, which is what? Which is what? Help me out. A culture of every member, every Sunday. Pastors, you just have to drill this into your congregation. That's why you do this on a Sunday morning. Preach a great sermon on hospitality, but drill home every member, every Sunday. You do not have to be a great evangelist. You don't have to be a biblical scholar. You just have to be you. There's something about you that God saw in you, that called you into ministry, not ordained ministry, but into ministry. There's something about you that God needs in this world, that God wants to leverage in this world. So don't let age, don't let any excuse override God's simple fact. Here I am. Here I am. Use me. And it starts with hospitality. Now, I've learned this in this 5-10 link rule, that no one wants to be unfriendly. But there's a reason that people find it hard to leave their connection group and go out and meet somebody new. Hi, I'm Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim.
And Jan and I, because as important as it is for me to introduce myself to Jan, it's even more important to immediately make a connection, to connect Jan to someone else. So that's through an association, Or on a Sunday morning, it might just be a person who's walking right by you. Just say, hey, Jan, have you met, this person? Because more important than an introduction is a what? Connection. That's our culture, right? We all intuitively know our job is to connect people to God, right? To connect people to the church, to connect people to one another. We even have a name for it. The Methodist Church is what kind of a church? A connectional church. If that's why we say we are, let's be that. I love to see a church where people are out there just making connections constantly, because you never know which connection becomes the bridge over which somebody walks. Here's what stops people. It's that whole thing of names, isn't it? We can't remember names. Am I telling the truth? Friends, don't worry about it. Everybody knows that we can't remember names. People understand that. We just have to own it. There is no sin in not remembering a name. In this fast-paced, hurried world in which we live, we have so much data coming into our head. Things like names, right? Am I telling the truth? Don't worry about it. There's no sin in not remembering a name. The sin is this. On a Sunday morning, first-time guests, you meet them when you allow not remembering a name to prevent you from making a connection. So we practice hospitality, and on Sunday morning, pastors, we encourage you, would you teach this? Just get a few volunteers, every Sunday, and teach it. So let me just, would you mind, Paul? And would you mind? Help them out. Rudy, would you mind? So I just bring them up onto the platform to practice, because Romans 12:13 says practice hospitality. So we're going to practice, first of all, the 5 of the 5-10 leap rule. The 5 is what? Time. All right? So you two are talking. I don't know if you know each other, but introduce yourself. Very good, buddy. And so Paul sees Rudy over here, and and it's 5 minutes till, and so he just goes over, just extends a hand of friendship. So now hold on. Now we're acting now, so we're pretending. Indianans are a tough crowd. I'll direct.
Well, I was trying to interact.
So you walk over, introduce yourself.
Yes,
Intentional.
I'm Rudy Nichols.
So Paul gives his name, Rudy gives his name, which means what?
Game on.
Game on. So Paul, what you want to do is connect her to your friend over here.
Right.
But here's what happens. Here's what happens, doesn't it? In the 10 seconds it takes, he's forgotten his name. Doesn't this happen to you? You hear a name, zip, right through your head. It's out the other side. You completely forget it. Here's what happens then. He doesn't want to be awkward. He doesn't want to be embarrassed. So Paul fails to make a connection. He wastes an opportunity. So when you can't remember his name, which happens, but you remember her name, just bring him close. So you want to look right at him, wave right toward her, and say, have you met Jan?
No, I haven't.
Oh, nice to meet you.
So-
I read your name tag, though.
That's okay.
You didn't tell me your name, Paul.
But Rudy, but that's what will happen. You'll introduce themselves, okay? All right, so the two of you are talking, you're buddies. We're going to practice the 10, which is what? Distance. So hold on. So Jan, they're talking, and here comes Jan by herself, alone, bedraggled, the weight of the world on her shoulders. So you break out, you introduce yourself.
Well, good morning. I'm Paul.
Hi, Paul. I'm Jan.
So means what? Will? Game on. And he wants to introduce him to his friend, but just tell me that this doesn't happen to you. In the 10 seconds it takes, he's forgotten both their names. Doesn't this happen? Especially when you see somebody in a different setting, a different environment. So when you can't remember either person's name, don't let that stop you, Paul. Just bring them close together and say, have you two met?
No, we haven't.
Hi, I'm Jan.
Hi, Jan. I'm Rudy Nichols.
And that's just what will happen. Okay? Thank you. Give him a hand. So we practice this. We model this on the platform on Sunday morning to free people up, to practice right after church ends. 9 times out of 10, they will introduce themselves. Then Paul's heard their names again. Gives him a better chance to remember. Now, 1 time out of 10, they won't. But when that happens, don't panic. You always have Methodism's magic word. when they don't introduce themselves. Or pastors, this happens to you on a Sunday morning. You know people, but they don't. They know you as their pastor, but you don't know all of them. Don't have those fake conversations. So when you can't remember somebody's name, you never have to say, "Hey, are you new here?" Because Lisa may have been here for 20 years in a different service or sitting in a different part of the sanctuary. So you never have to say, "Gee, you sure are forgettable," or anything like, "I can't remember your name." You always have Methodism's magic word, which is simply this. You just say, "Help me with the name," and she'll tell me. Because everyone loves to help. And that's our culture. We're a helping denomination. I love it when I'm at a church and I hear out in the hallway, "Help me, help me, help me." It just drives home the culture. Now, one last word, friends. Remember, practice in the ponds you know best. But don't stop there. This sometimes happens. Ruth is a guest. She's come. She actually went to a Sunday school class. I met her. We had a conversation on Sunday. And then on Thursday morning, I'm pushing my grocery cart down the aisle, and she comes the other way. And I panic because why? I can't remember the name. I head to the asparagus. You don't need to do that. Just practice this 5-10 link rule. Just introduce yourself. Everybody knows we have trouble with names, right? Now, this is a simple tool. But here's what I've learned as a presenter around the country, is a lot of time I present to squatters. You know what a squatter is? Like, no matter what you teach me, I'm not going to do squat. I can share with you the 5-10 link rule, and I can tell you the chances are if your church creates a culture of hospitality, known as the church of the first 10 seconds, if you will model it as leaders, just find, now it doesn't have to be a first-time guest. Practice. Practice today. At your next break, I'd sure love to see a lot of people introducing themselves to somebody else and then immediately connecting them. Immediately is the important word. Remember in the story of the fisherman? Jesus said, from now on, I've read this Bible many times, right? As you have. And never once does Jesus ever say, "Follow me and I will make you the best committee chairperson in the world." As important as that may be. Never once does Jesus say, "Follow me and I'll make you the best musician in the world." As important as that may be. Never once does Jesus say, "Follow me and I'll make you the best preacher in the world." Jesus has one essential. One. Follow me and I'll make you fishers. Follow me and I'll make you. It's time for us to look each other in the eye in the church and ask this simple question. If we're not fishing, are we really following? Practice in your church. Don't stop. Once you get good at hospitality, then go. Find neighbors that are nowhere near the church. Introduce. Connect. Remember the disciples, after Jesus said, "Follow me and I'll make you fishers," what's the next word in the Bible? Immediately, they left their nets. Friends, we can't wait. Immediately is upon us as a denomination. Immediately. So practice in your break today. 5-10 link. Start it tomorrow. You don't have to have a committee. You just start it. Just a few of you. It's all it takes. It'll catch on. Make sense? Are we up? Am I past time? Do I have more time? Oh, well, we better stop because I'm a preacher. Thank you. Y'all been great. Thanks.
Well, as we go through the day talking about loving your neighbor, we have a little series of some videos. We're going to track the story of some people as they embark on a journey of loving their neighbor. So Note whenever you're watching this, the reminder of how, or in this first video, that reminder to kind of one friend encouraging another to kind of return back to remember God's call on our lives to go out and love our neighbors. So let's check it out.
Mind if I have a seat?
Hey, Bob, no. Quiet yourself, buddy. What's going on?
Well, you know, I kind of feel like the neighborhood's going downhill lately.
What are you talking about?
You know, someone moved into the Smith's old house over the weekend?
Really? No, we were gone over the weekend, so we didn't see that. But what's that got to do with the neighborhood going downhill?
Some divorced Republican woman with a couple of kids. She probably even voted for Trump.
How would you even know that? And what difference would it make if she did?
I'm just tired of idiots moving in around here. The first thing she did was hang an American flag like some Tea Party Republican. There was no husband around. Just a couple old people like Julie and I. Probably her parents she was probably living with. Then there were a couple little kids. If they were teenagers, we'd probably have cops around here every weekend.
Why do you assume the worst?
Hey, you over there with that dust mop of a dog. Don't be letting it do a dump on my yard.
Quit it!
Why?
Can you be neighborly?
Neighborly? To a man that walks a yappy little dog like that? He needs to walk a manly dog. Like a German Shepherd. Or a bulldog. He's probably even a Cardinals fan. What kind of idiot is that?
Manly dog. So that's your deal. You know what? And also, you might want to be careful about what idiot you happen to be speaking to right now. Hello?
Oops.
Look, I don't know if you're aware of it or not, Bob, but you're kind of getting a bit of a reputation around the neighborhood.
Really?
Bob, it's not a good thing. No. They want to vote you the grumpiest man in the neighborhood award.
Grumpy? Who would say that?
Yeah, I'm as shocked as you are, Bob. I am as shocked as you are. Look, I found it moderately amusing when you set the sprinklers on the Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay, fine. But when you turn them on the little old ladies that walk here in the morning, yeah, that's a little too far.
Nailed him, though.
That's not good.
Yeah, Julie did think that was a little rude, too. But it's a bunch of neighborhood women walking every morning. That's just another sign of gossip going on.
Look, Bob, we've been friends and neighbors for a number of years, right?
Yeah.
But I got to be honest with you, man, I don't really understand where you're coming from lately. You make assumptions about everything and about everybody. But this is still a good neighborhood. Okay? It's not going downhill. It's just different from when we moved in here all those years ago. There are still great people that live here. All right? So, I mean, if you would probably figure that out if you just took some time and be a little neighborly. And if you reached out and tried to get to know them, you might find you got a lot more in common with them than you think.
Really?
Look, I don't know if you remember it or not, but when we first moved here, I was kind of the grumpy guy, all right? But it was you who invited me to church.
Yeah.
Okay? And it was there that I learned a pretty important lesson myself.
Really? What kind of lesson was that?
Look, it's that Jesus didn't just come back for me, all right? And he didn't just come back for the people who conveniently agree with just me, all right? Jesus came back for everybody. Jesus loves everybody. And Bob, that includes divorced women. That includes people that raise an American flag or belong to the Republican Party. That includes idiot Cardinal fans. And it includes people who don't happen to walk manly dogs. I'll see you later, buddy.
See you, John.
All relate just a little bit to that, can we not? I think we all get a little bit grumpy from time to time. I think we like to, point our finger at other people that are grumpy, but I think we all have our moments in life where we've been grumpy, right? And that's kind of why we're here, to help remember, each and every day. It's tough to wake up and be game on every day, but when we are refreshed by the Holy Spirit and we step out in faith and really find that compassion for others, we can't help but do what we have to do to make those connections with people. So I've got a verse here from Hebrews chapter 10, and it says, "Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful." We have hope in Christ, right? Hope, lots of hope. And that's something we don't always see in a lot of the culture around us today, and we have something special in that hope that we offer. But it continues and says, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." You know, I think this is what we do at church. We meet together, we encourage, we connect, we build those relationships. And to me, that's hospitality. Hospitality is all about being welcoming. It's about embracing people. It's making time and space and putting your focus and energy on someone else outside of yourself. And that's really love. To me, love and hospitality just intertwine and are very much the same thing, because you can't have one without the other. So as your resource fairy here today, I have a few resources for you. Certainly, I want to lift up Jim's book as a great resource for you to read. He's sharing with us today, but I would definitely recommend grabbing that book and giving it a read and putting those principles into practice in your church, because we do want our churches to be incredibly hospitable places. They should be the best place to go to receive, love and embrace and care from others. So grab that book. I also want to note today that from 3 to 5, some of you may have registered for it. If you haven't, I think our policy is the more the merrier, but after we get done with our session today from 3 to 5, Jim's going to be doing a special time focused just on training up your hospitality team in your church. And where's that going to be?
Can I see how many people are planning on being there, please? We'll tell you.
Okay, we'll let you know where that's going to be at the end. But I think if you want to come and you aren't already signed up, we'll absolutely take you, because that's another great opportunity to really equip you and your church to put this into practice even more. I want to also mention another resource that I have found helpful at our church as a way of really kind of living into hospitality and equipping people in difficult times in their lives, or preventing difficult times in your lives. Perhaps there's a resource out there. I don't know if you've heard of Orange, the curriculum that they do a lot of children's ministry and things like that, but they also have a thing called Married People. And we have used this at our church. It costs money, but it doesn't cost a ton of money, but it makes work easier for you. It's kind of all done for you. And this is really focusing on a ministry to enrich marriages and support people in their marriages, which I know isn't everybody in the church, but I think it's a really helpful resource that people who are wanting to grow in your marriage and have a better marriage. And when you have a healthy marriage, it helps you with parenting and raising kids, and that's a whole aspect of ministry. And this is something that we've used at my church. My church is not massive. You don't have to be a big church to do it. You can kind of be any size of church that you are. And we have done, there's different parts of it. There's date nights, there's different things like that. We've done these large group experiences, and we have found it a great time to practice hospitality. It's a way to invite people into the church. We host dinner. We have a minimal cost, a catered meal, so everybody's getting a nice kind of date night out of the deal. And then it's just fun and games. I feel like we don't laugh a lot at church. We kind of get down to, the sermon and the business and that kind of thing. And we have had more laughter at our church in these, adults, young and old, up tossing balls and playing games. It's kind of like youth group for adults, a little bit. And then they follow that up with a video message, or if you want to do the message yourself, you can, but the video's done. There's scripts. It's all kind of prepackaged, but I just wanted to point that out, as there are some resources for extra things if you really want to, I think, go above and beyond with supporting people in their lives and encouraging each other in specific areas of their lives. There are opportunities like that, so I'd highly recommend. You can find more at marriedpeople.org or Married People Churches. So another good resource. And again, I know there's a bunch of other ways out there that you can do this. So we're going to, at lunch is the next thing on the agenda, and we are going to put some of this into practice. Jim wants us to practice that 5-10 link, which I think we absolutely need to do. I also have some resources on your table at lunch, and we really hope that as you move downstairs into that time of meeting together, that we really practice loving our neighbor. I think we think when we are born, however we're born, is with whatever social skills we have is what we have. But I think social skills is not necessarily genetic. Some of it comes that way, but some of it's a learned skill, and we can really practice it. I'm naturally an introverted person, but I've tried to spend time working on talking to people, and it's tough sometimes. Talking to people can be uncomfortable, and it can get kind of crazy. And how do I get beyond just, oh, hey, how are you? What about this weather? How do we get a little bit deeper? So I've put some resources on your table about the art of witty banter. It's not a Christian book, but it has some good things. So if you're looking at how do we take that relationship just a little deeper and have some interesting conversation, grab one of those, take it home with you. Talk about it, try it out, that kind of thing as you're interacting over lunch. And I think one thing we don't always think about is our body language. John's always making fun of me because I have lots of body language, especially when I talk. But I think we don't always think about it. So I'm going to warm us up here with a little practice. So I have a 4-year-old son. We're always talking about emotions and, how you express your emotions because he has a lot and we need to help him to manage those emotions. So I think we still work on that as adults too. So I want us all to make the grumpiest face you can. Just like, oh yeah, those are good. Grumpy faces. Okay, now make the happiest face. That's someone, nobody ever makes that face when you're up in front of a group talking. So, feel that happy face. How do your muscles feel? Remember that. How are your cheeks? How are your eyes? So I want us to practice that because sometimes we need to work on that muscle memory. When they send missionaries out in the field, I've heard it told that as they train missionaries, they actually work on what your resting face is, your natural face. They train them to have a more open and welcoming and happy face. Guys, I feel so excited already just looking at you right now. So that's your first practice. We're all going to lunch, so that smile will stay there. But I want you to put that into practice at lunch over the break, and just something to think about as you go forth out into the world and work on loving your neighbor. So we're going to move into lunch. I know that's happening downstairs. Ann has some, I'm going to let Ann do some instructions, and then I'll pray for us before we go down. So
Actually, y'all are early.
we are early.
Well, I think, Jim, if you want to do exercises, this would be a great time to do it.
I can do anything.
Is that
Perfect.
okay? But I will give some instruction because lunch is being delivered. Go for it.
How much time? Okay. So I'm going to ask a couple of you to hand this handout. Would you keep this face down? That is, don't peek, my Hoosier friends. Don't peek till I tell you to, please. Okay. Face down. Pressure's on, I know. Look at her. She can't hardly stand it. So this is pretty good stuff, huh? Are we on target? Are we helpful? Well, this is going around. I'd like to ask you if you would just do one quick thing. Resist that temptation. But would you turn around and just have quick conversation with the folks right around you? What today, and the whole morning, what's kind of jumped out at you? Any aha moment? What's been something that you think, this is something I can take home? Would you mind just sharing? I want to have you. Okay. Couple more minutes, just a couple more minutes. So. All right, thank you. Anybody brave enough to stand up and shout out what's jumped out at you so far today? Ruth, if you would.
I was just saying that it was very helpful to just go through an exercise. I mean, putting it into action. Hi, I'm Ruth. Hi, I'm Joan. I'll be having that bill over here. You have a connection to you. Just immediately taking a concept and making it practical, I think is very helpful.
It's one of those things we just forget to think about. And you remember that opening video? I don't know why it is. I plant new churches. A lot of my work, I help churches around the country get started. I could tell you a new church, by the time it's just a few months old, already begins to turn into being a settler. Just imagine if your church is very old at all. And it's just a human reality. I'm not being critical. Sometimes it takes somebody from outside the system to shake things up a little. And I hope this has been helpful. I mean, you just fall into settled behaviors, and then that becomes a pattern, becomes a rut, right?
We're recording this. If you could repeat what you said so we can have it on the recording.
Okay. What I said was that I think it's great that we are immediately talking about a concept and then demonstrating and putting it into action. So, hi, I'm Ruth, and then responding, hi, I'm Joan, and then I say, I'd like to introduce you to this person who has a connection to your job or your interests or what have you. I think it's very helpful to state a concept and then bring it down to a practical level, and you're more likely to carry it away with you.
Thank you. And this afternoon, not all of you will be staying at the last session, but will you be taping that last session too, do you know? But I'm going to share with you some follow-up questions, after you've said hello and things to do. Anybody else?
I just like the concept.
Be hospitable.
Thank you. I just like the consciousness of being intentional and be very conscious of all the interactions we have. And the other thing I thought was just brilliant is your resting happy face, because that would be welcoming.
That was great. I love that. I'm going to steal that.
You want me to keep going?
Yeah, just let's hear from a few folks. Yeah, I mean, you all are here with each other. You have more to teach each other than I have to teach you, I can assure you.
So the idea of linking a new person with a current person because they have similar affinities, that means you have to already know the current people and what their affinities are, so you know who to connect them to and how to link them. If you don't know the current people and what they like, you can't do that.
Yeah, a very, very good point. It's really good to connect by common affinity, but tomorrow when you start practicing, or even today, look, there's not a thing wrong with just connecting immediately to the person nearest you, even if you don't know their name now, right? So when you meet somebody, it's good to have those first few seconds, but as quickly as you can. If you just see somebody standing next to you, say, have you met? It creates a climate and a culture. And so just anybody you can, just immediately find somebody to connect with.
I don't want to be a contrarian here, but I do have a question.
Sure.
We have several people in our church I kind of avoid, because if you say hello to them, you're trapped for the next half hour, and it makes it hard to disengage and go meet that new person. Do you have any advice on how to gracefully disengage from somebody?
So try this. Help me with the name. Steve. So try this, Steve. Say, did you use mouthwash this morning? This is a real problem, and that is because churches are. It is not at all strange to find people that, in a church setting, they have found some acceptance, and they really need that, and so they'll hang on to you. So I don't want to make extra light of that. We say in new church work. I don't know if any of you are starting any new churches. If you're not, I really encourage you to do that. But in new church work, we say, people who tend to go to a new church are often what we call granola members, nuts, fruits, and flakes. And they have found a small setting, but what they can do is just demand inordinate time. So really, the only thing you can do is try as gently as you can to say, we're practicing good hospitality here, and I'm going to go find somebody else that I haven't yet met. That's correct. Right. Just it takes nuance. I mean, you may
stand up.
Yeah. That's right. Or you can connect them to somebody else. Which can help them. I mean, it can help them.
Here's Donna.
Hi, I'm Donna, and what I was thinking, that person is talking to you and going to keep you for half an hour. You can say, I think that's a new person right over there. Let's go talk to him.
Bring them with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Good idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, flip over your handout and shout out what you see when you see it.
Frog. Horse.
So what did you hear shouted out? Frog, horse. It's the same picture. I just use this corny little exercise to remind folks what we see depends on what? Our perspective. Now, this is really helpful in church meetings. Just as an aside, this is a free aside. You know, when you're in a meeting and somebody sees something differently, it doesn't mean that they're stupid or they're wrong. And church members, God is calling us to this moment to model the behavior that accepts that people have different perspectives. Because for some reason, have you noticed this in our world today? It's like everybody has permission to be as mean and snarky as you want to be. And if anybody disagrees with you in anything, you have the permission to think that they're stupid or that they're just wrong. And I don't think many sermons about this is going to help. I just think modeling behavior to understand people have different perspectives. But my point in asking you to look at this morning is now look at me. What I've been talking about and what I'm going to talk about, especially if you're staying for the later session this afternoon, I'm going to ask you to look at everything from the perspective of a first-time guest. Okay? From the perspective. Because churches basically fall within one of two broad constructs. And unfortunately, many churches plan everything they do on a Sunday morning from the perspective of the longtime loyal member, with the hope that a guest would just happen to get it. Just catch on. Churches that are growing today have figured out that you plan everything from the perspective of that first-time guest, with the assurance that you've created a culture in your church that the long-time loyal member gets it because they get the mission. That we aren't here to be consumers, but producers. We're here to replicate what God did in our lives in the lives of other people. Am I making sense? Now, I'm going to be doing a full-scale deal with this church tomorrow, but I can, just during the break, just walk around. I can tell you, this is a church that's modeling for you really great culture. Just look at the things that they do. Look at what's on the wall. Just look at, they're saying to that first-time guest, and here's the key. Here's the key. A first-time guest who's unchurched is not hardly interested at all in the whats that you are doing. We tend to say what to ourselves. What? Well, we're going to collect food for the shelter. That's what we're doing. The guest wants to know the why. So look at your printed materials. Look at your hallways, in terms of hospitality, what's up there, that it just shouts out. Here's the message. Here's the message. A first-time guest gets one of two messages, and you only get one chance. First-time guest gets a message of, we are thinking about you. We're going to answer your questions. We are thinking about you. Or they get this message. We are not expecting you or thinking about you. We're thinking about ourselves. That's the two messages. Am I making sense? I don't know in your church, so look around. And again, feel free, give me a call. I'll be glad to help you with this. Just be careful that you're not messaging to a first-time guest that this church is all about us and we hope you catch on. And if you do, that you'll jump in our boat. We want a message, we're a church on a mission. We are sold out. 110%. We're going to fish for new people because they need the grace of God. That's the message. That's the message. Now, I mentioned to you the number one reason why a first-time guest does not become a second-time guest, which is what? What? Help me out. What? Poor hospitality. The easiest way for a church to grow is great hospitality. But I would be remiss if I didn't also say, here's the number one reason that church members leave the church. You probably all experienced that, haven't you? Often that person who leaves is a good church member. Often it's a leader. Often that person who leaves is a friend of mine. Am I making sense? Anybody want to guess today, according to all the research, the number one reason that people leave a church? They grow disconnected often. That's all those are preferences. They're not getting fed. All those fit into it. Here's the number one, because I want to share this with you because you can start tomorrow to change this. Here's the number one reason: complaining. Complaining. Now, look at me. I don't want to be stepping on your toes. I mean, I don't know you that well, but I'm saying this from a loving perspective for you. A first-time guest has a radar, and when they walk in the door, if they pick up on conflict and complaining, they have made their decision. No matter what else happens, they won't be back. Here's what they pick up on. Little groups of members with body language that indicates angst and mouth movement that's yin-yanging. They don't have to hear it. They just see it. Finger in the chest of the next person. You know what I'm saying? They just feel it. Here's some changes of the world today. Because the world is the way it is, people feel beat up a lot of time. They feel beat up at their job. They feel beat up in the school. They feel beat up in their neighborhood if they have different views politically or social. People often just feel beat up in their family. Can I tell the truth here? And when somebody walks into a church, they want to feel built up, not beat up. And they just sense if a church is a place where it's everybody looking at things from their own perspective. You maybe have heard this old legend of a kingdom far, far away in a land, time distant. There was a king who had 2 queens, and each queen loved him dearly. And what each loved most about the king was his beautiful salt and pepper colored hair. And on the nights when one of the queens was with the king, she liked his black hair best. So she would pick out the silver hair. And on the nights when the other queen, you see where I'm going with this, she loved the silver hair the most. And she would pick out the black hair. Until soon, what each loved the most was gone. I just want to share my heart with you this morning as a consultant that works in hundreds of Methodist churches. It breaks my heart to see how many churches are picking themselves to death because their perspective is theirs. They'll complain about the preacher. They'll complain about the choir director. They'll complain about the Sunday school teacher. Am I telling the truth in Indiana too? So let me just say it clearly. I'm not your bishop. I'm not your DS. I'm not your pastor. I hope you'll consider me a friend, but I just say this dearly. If you are here today, you're probably some kind of a church leader. There is never a reason or an excuse for a church leader to say a negative word about their church on a Sunday morning. I can just tell you. Because when you say your negative word, the person who repeats it says a sentence. And the person who repeats that, it becomes a paragraph. And the person who repeats that, it becomes a page. And the person who repeats that, it becomes a narrative. And the narrative of your church and your community, if it's a narrative of a place where people are picky and complaining and critical, folks are saying, I don't want any of that. You know where I'm going to go? I'm going to go out to that fast-growing new mega church where people can be anonymous and everybody loves each other. I'm just telling you. So friends, tomorrow, you can start practicing the 5-10 link rule. And just practice. It may be awkward at first, but just practice. It doesn't have to be a first-time guest. Just find somebody tomorrow that you don't know well and practice, okay? And tomorrow, you can practice being a positive disciple of Jesus Christ. Because here's the truth. Remember Max Lucado? Am I doing okay time-wise? He's saying wrap it up. Max Lucado, remember, writes all those cool devotional books. He just wrote this one. I remember, and I'll just share this with you and have lunch. So when he was a little boy, his dad took him and his best friend fishing. Remember this story? And they had a little camper, on the back of the truck. And they pull up to the lake to go fishing. They're so excited because they're going fishing. And they open the door, and the wind is blowing so hard it slams the door, and they knew they couldn't get on the lake. So they shut the door. And they occupied their time by playing games and, that kind of thing. Next morning they get up. Now they get to go fishing in this pouring down rain. They can't go out and go fishing, so they finish playing Monopoly and Life and all these other games and doing what kids would do. But you know what happens when people, after a while, they begin to get irritated with each other and pick at each other. And they went home, everybody fighting. Said Max Lucado, if you're supposed to be going fishing and you don't go fishing, you usually end up fighting. And I've learned that about churches. If we're fishing, we don't have much time to be fighting. But just check the thermostat of your church. There's a lot of complaining, a lot of fussing, a lot of picking from everybody's perspective. I'm almost willing to bet they're not doing much fishing. Amen? So things you can do. And I'll hand out a last handout when we come back. We can get that after lunch. Okay, thanks.